Hey there, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to go over my top 25 metal albums from the month of May. It turned out to be a pretty underground heavy month, so yeah, here we go. As always, there are two playlists in the description, one with my favorite track from each album, and another with all the releases I came across on Spotify this month, so feel free to check those out at your leisure. Before we get started, I'd like to give a little shout out to one of our friends here in the YouTube metal community. Pair of Jeans Reviews and his band Bestial Tongues just released their debut EP, and it's a fun little grindcore outfit, so I've thrown that in the playlist as well. Starting off at 25, we have Phyllomedusa, and they dropped most of their discography on Spotify this month, though I'm not sure any of the albums are actually new. But I just kind of wanted to talk about them and give them some acknowledgement as being one of the coolest and most extreme acts in experimental noise grind. So if you're one of those people who enjoys listening to the most experimental, crazy, harsh stuff out there, this would be a good act to check out. 24, we have Eminence, and this is melodeath infused groove metal. So it's kind of in that corner where Fear Factory and Devil Driver exist, but it's also got some modern metalcore sort of ideas to it as well, with the big clean choruses and things like that. 23, we have Veroni with some instrumental progressive metal. And the main selling point here is really the jazz infusion and heavy use of pianos. So you should definitely expect to hear a lot of jazz pianos while someone gently gents in the background. This is actually going to be my instrumental pick for the month, as I found it to be quite a bit more engaging than Liquid Tension Experiment. However, if that album has been off your radar, you might want to check that out as well. 22 is Project Roenwolfe with some good old heavy metal. This strikes me as mostly being in the style of Painkiller era Judas Priest, so it's not particularly fast or technical or anything like that. It's just some good old heavy metal riffing with big sing-along choruses. 21, we have quite a unique release from Sheogorath, and they have explicitly set out to blend melodeath, thrash, and black metal. So you end up with a lot of scenarios where there's a Gothenburg lead playing over a thrash riff, which is accompanied by black metal vocals. And it turns out to be this weird hodgepodge of genres that fit together surprisingly well. And yeah, there are a couple absolute bangers on this album. Woo woo! 20 is gonna be Bloodbound, and this is some straightforward European-style melodic power metal. It's really tight. The songs tend to follow that verse-chorus structure that you might get from a band like Sabaton, but it's also so tremendously melodic that it kind of reminds me of the band Twilight Force for some reason. Pew 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 pew. Pew pew pew. Pew pew pew. 19, we have Subterranean Masquerade, and this is a particularly jubilant brand of progressive metal. It's bright, lighthearted, and at times even a bit cartoonish. And in some ways, the sound palette reminds me a lot of Empath by Devin Townsend, but I honestly kind of walk away from this album feeling more like I listened to something by Dave Matthews Band. 18, we have dEMOTIONAL with some modern melodic metal. So it's more based in hard rock than anything else, but it of course has some underlying gent and electronics and all those kind of goodies. However, I also appreciate that they draw really strongly from a Gothenburg basis as well, and the band is from Sweden. So really it's just fun, catchy, very accessible, and easy to enjoy music, which is kind of the bottom line in some ways. 17th is going to be Marius Danielsen with a heaping dose of cheese. This is the conclusion to his three-part rock opera thing, The Legend of Valley Doom. So if you are the kind of person who enjoys a 4.5-hour high fantasy power metal odyssey, here you go. In all seriousness, I don't discriminate against the cheese, and I think the execution's actually quite good for exactly what it's trying to be. 16, Vulture. This is a blend of speed metal, thrash, nawabum, hair metal. It's just kind of a little bit of everything that you could want from the 1980s, and it is very over the top about it. It's a very energetic album, and the just little touch of silliness that it has makes it overwhelmingly fun. 15, we have Doordada, and this is the monthly prog monster. This thing is dense, decadent, and a whole lot to digest. But the critical reception on it has been overwhelmingly positive, so I definitely recommend it to any prog metal fans. But also, if you're a prog metal fan, you already know about it and probably have an opinion on it, so, you know, whatever. Here it is. Dordeduh. Doordada. Har by Doordada. Har Doordada. Doordada. 14. Mental Cruelty. And this is deathcore, but it also has a tremendous atmospheric aspect to it, which increasingly seems to be the signature sound of Unique Leader Records. And as such, I'd say its closest cousin is definitely Humanity's Last Breath. But if you are a person who likes some really heavy deathcore that also manages to create an amazing and oppressive atmosphere a la some Atmo Black, definitely don't miss this one. 13 is Keonashi, and this is probably metallic hardcore, but it's also quite angular in the like Dillinger mathcore sense. But I think the real selling point is actually how emo it is. Like, it has a lot of that like whiny emo feel to it and some very over-the-top vocal performances. And I honestly kind of get the vibe that it's like a deep descendant of that like Rites of Spring true emo hardcore genre. So in that regard, it's like extremely unique because I can't even think of the last time a modern album reminded me of that. T12 is gonna be more Bific with some big, messy OSDM. It reminds me a lot of bands like Morbific and Creeping Death. And I think the sound design here is really what does it for me. It's just huge and murky, and it constantly hums with like this room-rattling gunk. However, it's also all about the grooves. Like, the riffs on this thing are absolutely infectious, and it's somehow more of a head nodder than an atmospheric experience, despite the fact that the sound design is quite atmospheric. So 11, 11 is going to be Perverted Dexterity, and it is some technical, brutal death metal. And I know that technical, brutal death metal is like literally a meme about how ridiculous the metal subgenres can be, but it's also literally the genre of this album. So yeah, this thing is all about the technical aggression, and it pretty much never sinks down into a slam riff. So as such, it's kind of one of those albums that you throw on and it just like blows your hair back through the entire experience. And that usually just kind of gets fatiguing, but I found the like super punchy, loud, distorted production and constantly changing riffs to be really engaging the whole way through. So yeah, as such, this thing is gonna be my death metal album of the month. 10, we have Esoc Trillium with a 78-minute progressive black metal monstrosity. And what really sold me on this album is actually the strong death metal and kind of symphonic influences in the middle of the album. So even if you're not fond of like the sheer amount of largesse in this thing, some of the tracks on it, in particular like Balduthir and Agaca, I think are some of the most impressive blackened death metal songs of the whole year. 9, Gonemage. So this is the side project of one of the members of Kaonashi, and longtime viewers of this channel will know that I absolutely loved that album back in February. And this is pretty much cut from the same cloth. It's in that same territory of black metal infused with indie rock and Nintendo core. And honestly, I think this is some of the coolest stuff happening in the metal sphere. So if you are at all interested in like experimental black metal, I'd encourage you to at least check this one out. 8 is gonna be Violet Cold. So there are actually like 6 perfectly respectable black gaze albums that came out this month, but I think this is the one worth bringing to your attention. It's quite dynamic in that it's sometimes very shoegaze and other times very black metal, but the main thing that is worth noting is the heavy inclusion of like contemporary Eastern pop vocals. This album is quite upbeat in its demeanor, and the vocals are something I've really never seen associated with black metal before, and just like that weird combination makes this just kind of hands down my favorite black gaze album of the year so far. 7, we have Impure Wilhelmina, and these guys have been around for like 25 years and established a very unique sound, which is really a blend of like gothic and doom and a lot of post-metal. And this really feels like an extension of their previous work, but also just kind of like their magnum opus. So if you are in the mood for some like gothic doomy stuff with mostly clean vocals, but also some harsh as well, you know, I think you might just find this to be like absolutely brilliant. You know, or not. What's like the best way to do 6? Is it like this? This? That? Ghost Iris with some modern metalcore. And this is pretty much meat and potatoes metalcore, but the execution is fantastic. The production is just huge and loud and punchy, and the clean choruses are catchy, and every song just has some unique like riff or groove that makes it feel distinct. So it's really just one of those albums where it feels like every song could have been a single. Okie doke, cream of the crop, top 5. 5 is going to be Grey Aura, and this is definitely some avant-garde stuff, but it's also a bit more approachable than some of its peers like Imperial Triumphant or Ad Nauseam. And it seems a little less interested in overwhelming you and sort of aims to be pleasing. And there's an absolute myriad of stuff going on, from just like straight black metal blast beats to like a couple prolonged jazz intermezzos and even some like nylon string Spanish inspired stuff. Overall, this feels like the kind of avant-garde which is trying to be cool rather than just like kind of kill you. And don't get me wrong, it's still some very extreme stuff, and if you don't listen to bands like Imperial Triumphant, it will be a lot to handle. But, you know, if you're fond of the avant-garde stuff, this is up there pretty much with the best of the best. 4th, we have some Christian unblack metal from Satan Destroyer, and oh boy, the sound design on this one. This album is just full of like razor sharp guitar tones, 500 BPM blast beats, and some of the most like insane harsh vocals I've ever heard. The vocals are clearly just bathed in effects and are like impossible to produce from an actual human, but that just makes them feel even more like some 10,000 pound lumbering behemoth. This is probably the most aggressive piece of black metal that I've heard all year, and despite some pacing issues towards the end of the album, I still think it is an incredible piece of black metal. Now, it is certainly very extreme, but if you are a hardened black metal listener, I think you'll appreciate just how different it is from like the average black metal sound. 3rd, we've got some prog metal from Vokonis, and this one just kind of feels like a home run. The mixture of sludge vocals and then clean vocals do a great job of building tension and then having like a big payoff. And despite prog kind of being a genre which isn't known for having hooks or choruses, these guys know how to write a single if they have to. There are tracks on here which are your usual like indulgent prog pieces, but there are also a few tracks that are just like catchy singles. In particular, Blackened Wings has just been stuck in my head literally all month. 2nd, oh man, Noctule. So this is a Skyrim-themed mellow black album from the frontwoman of Svalbard, Serena Cherry, and this is a like shimmery atmospheric type of mellow black, and it actually reminds me a whole lot of the album Moonlit Navigation by Inexorum. Every track on this has a distinct feel, and that is largely to the credit of some excellent guitar tones and emotive guitar runs in various keys and scales, and also a whole lot of nuanced, harsh, and clean vocal performances. I also think the production on this is absolutely stellar. The guitars sit at like a perfect level where they are attention grabbing but not overwhelming, and the vocals tend to sit a bit lower in the mix, which gives the whole album a little bit of an instrumental tinge. For example, the climax of Evenar works so well because there's like a big, carefully chosen guitar wall, and on top of it, there's like a call and response going on between this longing guitar lead and then these ethereal, mournful, clean vocals. But also there's harsh vocals, and they like jump right to the front of the soundstage and then just like hop out of focus and then like suddenly come back. It's rather jarring, but it's ghostly. So overall, I have basically no criticisms of this album, and I feel like it's pretty much the perfect atmospheric-leaning mellow black album. This thing is just like 40 minutes of ethereal sonic bliss. Woo! Alright, now that I'm done gushing about that, album of the month time, and it is the debut album of a progressive metal outfit from the Grecian underground, Khirki. So Khirki has an accessible and catchy progressive metal sound that's pretty reminiscent of bands like maybe Mastodon or Kvelertak, but also feels in no way derivative. because Khirki integrates a lot of like Nawatham and 70s hard rock and stoner doom into their sound, and then accents all of that with a heavy utilization of traditional Balkan instrumentation. So yeah, they have a very ambitious sound, but they also absolutely nail it, and this thing slaps. I don't really understand how you drop a debut album this good. They don't even have any like previous EPs or anything, so they have just gotten started in like the last few days, but man, I hope they really gain a lot of popularity. All right, Khirki, yeah, that is the good stuff, and I hope you'll take away some stuff you enjoy from this heaping pile of scrap metal, and you know, until next time, thanks for watching.